welcome to this episode of the Pilot Podcast. I am thrilled to have a longtime friend and client on today. It took me forever to get on his schedule because he's a very busy businessman. Lynn Martin owns 14 different radio stations in 4 different cities and is an avid college sports fanatic, I want to say. And so catching him between games and events and radio station things has just been difficult, but I have him here today for the next few minutes, and we are going to talk about Lynn's Premier One. And Lynn, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us.
Oh, thank you, Renee. Very, very nice to see you and talk to you today.
Wonderful. So you have flown your own planes for a long time and ended up moving out of a CJ into a Premier a few years back. And I would love for you to talk about why you did that and what was the attraction from moving out of one plane into the other.
Sure. Well, you kind of have to go back historically with me on different kinds of airplanes that I got interested in. But I started a long time ago when I was much younger and flew all kinds of little planes, and we can chat about that a little bit later. But the Premier jet was something that actually a friend of mine had. I had originally gotten interested in jet airplanes, when was that? Maybe in the early 2000s. And so I decided I had been flying a turbine airplane at that point, Cheyenne 2 with the Black Hawk converted engines. And, you know, I'm a speed freak. I really like things that go fast and go high. And I got interested in the jet world, and from a financial standpoint, my business was doing well enough that I felt like that might be the time to do it. So I went looking for a jet, and I bought a Citation jet actually in Germany, and flew it back, and that was an incredible adventure for me. But I had a good friend who also had started out with a CJ, and then actually he had a CJ1. As a matter of fact, your husband actually helped Phil, a friend of ours, with his CJ1, and he had an experience in the CJ that came around, and he just decided he wanted to try something else, and so he bought a Premier. And when I went flying with him in his Premier, I was just enamored with it, and at the time I wasn't ready to go, but years later, when an opportunity presented itself, that's when I made the jump to the Premier.
Okay, well, you mentioned this, and I'm just going to jump right on to this question. Tell me about the performance, because we've talked about how fast you go, and I want you to tell our audience about that.
Sure. Right. Well, first thing I do want to say, though, is that, you know, the numbers I'm going to give you are my general numbers. They're not exactly book numbers, and I'm not I'm not representing anybody that this is what the plane does. So, but for my general use of my airplane, I flight plan my airplane at 440 knots. And so, you know, you add 15% of that, and that's really what you're doing in miles an hour. So you're moving through the air pretty quick. It has a ceiling of 41,000 feet. And when I fly the plane, the way you want to fly it is as high as possible, because you get the best benefit of fuel burn and speed and distance by flying it high. That's the only downside to flying a jet in comparison to a turboprop, is that if you don't get the plane up high, you're going to eat a lot of gas. And so the cost of operating these planes becomes quite different. So your missions and your distances that you want to fly and what you're trying to accomplish come into play. And then a combination of that, along with, you know, what you're trying to do, and how you value your time and what you're trying to do in a day. I mean, frankly, my day is always trying to put a 10-pound bag in a 5-pound jar. And that sometimes is hard to get done. But I can't say enough about the performance of the airplane, though, overall, for what it does. I mean, it's, you know, when I was a kid, I used to watch the Jetsons on television, you know, growing up, and the dream of being able to have personal transportation was something that I remember. And so this airplane allows me to do that.
I love it. So you have radio stations in 4 different cities, and obviously you're the research kind of guy, you're a fact finder, and you decided that the Premier would easily meet your mission flying between those cities that are Kentucky, West Virginia, South Carolina, right? One other?
Correct.
One other state?
Oh, actually, well, I'm in two different cities in West Virginia, South Carolina, Kentucky. But I also do a lot of business that gets placed on our radio stations from other cities. We depend on retail outlets that advertise, what their goods and services are. So we do a lot of business from people out of New York and Chicago, Dallas, even Miami, Atlanta. So I use the plane to get around to all these different places to do what I need to do. And it's a very efficient means for me to do that. One of the things that got me interested in this as well over the years was I've always lived in communities where the air service wasn't the ability to go nonstop to wherever I wanted to go. So for example, if I want to go to Charleston, South Carolina from Lexington, Kentucky, which is where I live, I would have to get on a commercial flight and either have a stopover in Atlanta or in Charlotte, depending on the two airlines that can get to Charleston, South Carolina from Lexington. So when you add up the time that it takes to do that, you're looking at about a 5.5 hour day because of the stopovers and the ability to connect with different flights. In this particular case, this is an awesome trip for me. I can go from Lexington to Charleston. I'll climb up to roughly 41,000, some days 39,000, depending on the winds going west to east. And I can make that trip in about an hour. Some days 55 minutes, an hour and 5 minutes. But I mean, literally, I'm getting in the airplane, firing it up, and from takeoff to touchdown, it's literally 1 hour. And to be able to come out of the airplane being refreshed, because what the airplane does for me is I don't think about business when I'm flying. I think about flying. And it sort of air conditions my brain, and it gets me, I guess, a little bit of a relaxing feeling to it when I land. Now I'm ready to get into my business world, and I feel great. I go to work.
I love that. I was going to ask you about that a little bit later, how you compartmentalize those things. Flying requires a lot of attention for safety reasons, and business requires a lot of attention. And it sounds like you've developed a good balance for that. Do you have any tricks about how you do that, Lynn, or does that just come naturally to you?
No, I think you have to think about it a little bit to plan what you're going to do, and that's one of the things that flying is really good at, is it makes you plan. And I think you have to have a good plan in running a business, and you have to have a good plan in flying an airplane, and I think you have to have some kind of plan about your life and what you're trying to accomplish. But for me, I just enjoy the fact that it gets my mind on something totally away from what I'm doing at work. And I've had, I've just sort of tested the theory from time to time. I've had somebody I'll put it up in the co-pilot seat and we'll have a little conversation about something, and I don't like it. It really gets me thinking about too many things. And then I go back to my original plan where, it's like, look, I'm an airplane pilot up there, and I take this very seriously in what I do. I go to flight school every year. The insurance people demand that, but candidly, even if they didn't, I would do it anyway, because I don't think you can have, enough training to be able to do what we're talking about. Because in this case, when you're flying a light jet like this, I mean, you're going through the sky quick. And so if you got somebody coming from the other direction and you're up in the mid-high 30s, low 40,000s, and you're going 440 and they're going 440, I mean, you're talking about two things coming together at almost 1,000 miles an hour. I mean, that's not a lot of reaction time. So you need to be on top of your game.
Well, I'm going to skip around in my normal question order here because this brought to mind a question for me. I remember when you were moving from the CJ to the Premier and you were changing avionics platforms. And I remember that feeling to you, or you telling me that it felt like you were drinking through a fire hose with that training, because you had business going on at the same time that you were going through this training. Can you tell me a little bit about that? And do you recommend that people do that? Does it make you sharper, or is it overwhelming to switch avionics platforms?
Well, I think switching avionics platforms, if you are a pilot with a fair amount of time in the seat, is probably the most challenging potential part of doing this. For someone who is of my ilk, I don't want to say age, but I guess I just did. But, I remember when I was coming out of piston airplanes and first going into a turbine airplane, that I found it challenging because there was just more gadgets, more gizmos, and more things that you had to worry about when you transitioned from one kind of airplane to another. But as I got more into it, I got more comfortable. Actually, it became easier. But in this case, and let me talk about the CJ. That's a fabulous airplane, by the way. I had one for almost 10 years. It was my first jet. I enjoyed the heck out of flying it. It was very easy to fly. It had an EFIS system, for those who know what that is. That was very simplistic, and a flight management system that was very simple. So it didn't take a lot of real hard learning to go from a Navajo, which is what I came out of in that particular instance. I'd had a Piper Navajo for a while and went into the turbine airplane, into the Cheyenne II. But when I went to the Citation jet, the step up wasn't that big. But when I got to the Premier and decided I wanted to do that, that was a big part of the problem I had in learning how to fly the airplane. Because flying the airplane, when you're flying it, you're taking off and cruising and landing and climbing and all that, that's not the hard part. If somebody's going to transition into something like the Premier jet or something with ProLine 21, for example, which is what the avionics system is in the Premier jet, if you don't have any experience in doing that and you go to introductory, your beginning flight school for your initial course, I recommend that somebody have a real serious sit down with the people at the school and explain to them, you don't have any ProLine 21 experience and you really want to focus on that first. Because if you don't learn the ProLine 21, you can't fly this airplane. Because really what the Premier is and the ProLine 21 system is you're really managing an airplane more than you're flying it. You're a computer programmer to some degree in what makes the airplane really go and fly. They don't really want you up there, with your, I'm flying, here's the power, and I'm doing all this stuff at 30,000 feet. That's not how you fly this airplane. You fly it based on a computer, and you're programming something, and you hit a button, and the airplane starts to do what you want it to do. And you've really got to understand that system. And I've had the Premier now this is my 4th year in it, and I continue to still learn things in the ProLine that I didn't know. But it is a really, really fabulous tool and fabulous way to fly. But if you don't have any ProLine 21, I would tell you that you should go fly with somebody, right seat, maybe take a month and really spend some time trying to learn it. And if you can learn that system before you go to your initial flight school, you'll love flight school. In my case, I hated it. I
remember. You might have been a little grumpy, Lynn.
Listen, I was to the point where, literally, I was questioning whether I could do it because, the initial flight training when I took the Premier initial course they told me it was going to be 17 days. In my world, 17 days is like impossible. How am I going to do that? You stay away from my business for 17 days, not take emails and calls. It's very, very hard. But I had a very hard time learning the ProLine 21. I really did. But finally, I figured it out, I guess, and managed to get it all done. And it was a combination of both simulator training and in the plane training that I got. But I mastered it. But to me, that's the hardest part of understanding how to fly that airplane and learning the FMS system and all the different things that it will do for you. But once you learn it, now you've got something really that becomes fun.
That's fantastic. Well, I know you fly all over the Southeast during football season. What's the longest trip you've taken in the Premier?
The longest trip in the Premier on a given day was probably Lexington to San Francisco is probably the longest flight. Going out to see and cover, one of the things I get to do with my radio business is we have a couple of all sports stations and we're ESPN affiliates with some of them. So one of the things that I do is I'll actually go cover the games myself. So when I go and fly to see a football game or a basketball game, generally I'll do a call-in show with my host back at the station, giving them an on-the-side live report about how it feels to me to be at the game, what it's like what's the crowd like? Who are the people that went to the game? Was there anything extraordinary about what happened and what was my experience? And sometimes we'll take a customer to a game as well. So that's some of the benefit that I get out of doing this, but I am still trying to gain ratings and sell advertising by tying in the fact that I have a business plane with what I do. And the cool thing about what I do right now is none of my competitors have a plane. None of them have a jet. That's a real benefit to us. So when we go talk to customers and we can get them involved with us, that's a real difference that we have.
Well, I'm going to skip to talking about the people who sit in the back of the Premier. What does Catherine have to say? But besides the fact I am going to tell on her just a little bit,
Sure.
I think she likes the fact that there's a little bit more separation. So when she has to potty on the plane, there's a little bit more privacy than what y'all have flown in before. She and I have had that conversation a number of times. Tell me about the cabin comfort for the passengers on the plane.
Sure. Well, that's one of the secondary benefits. I mean, for me, flying the airplane, I'm always up front. So I don't necessarily, get to see all that's going on behind me in the back. But the big difference between what I've flown before and whether it was the Cheyenne 2 turbine airplane or the Citation jet, the CJ, is that the cabin size in the Premier is just much bigger. And the seats are a little bit bigger. The headroom is better. The aisle is wider, so you can actually get up and you can almost stand up in the airplane. And so the passengers are very comfortable back there from what my understanding is when I talk to them after a flight. And I always do, because I'm always trying to make sure that they have a good experience if I'm taking people along with me. And in the particular instance you're referring to, this airplane has a flushing potty and actually has doors that close in the back. So someone like Catherine can get some privacy back there if she wants to. However, I generally really try hard to get people not to use the potty in this airplane, because there is the secondary part of it. Yes, I have to go and deal with that after we land. So, you have a potty in the airplane. It's supposed to be more of like an emergency situation as far as I'm concerned, but it is there if you need it. It's functional, and in this airplane it's probably as good as it gets.
Well,
I think if I had one criticism of the potty deal, is that I wish that there was an outside way to service the potty from the outside as opposed to having to do it from the inside. The new designs that I'm seeing in new airplanes coming out of similar style, I'm starting to see that, and I think it makes an awful lot of sense to be able to include that.
Yeah, we see it a lot more in larger airplanes than the smaller ones. Lynn, can you describe to me the difference between a Premier 1 and a Premier 1A?
Sure. As far as performance, speed, altitude, anything the airplane can do, there is absolutely zero difference. And one of the reasons or the differences that they put into this airplane to become a 1A were primarily they put in a different braking system was available on the 1A. They put in a different lighting system than what I have in the 1. There is a super soundproof addition as an add-on that goes in the 1A as standard. I'm trying to think what else. Those are the primary things that, and then also most of the 1As had EFIS 5000. When I bought my airplane, one of the reasons I bought this particular airplane was that it had all the 1A mods already done to it. That was the beauty of why I wanted it versus a 1A. And there are mods that people can do. So in this case, somebody had put in the new brakes, somebody had put in the super soundproofing, the previous owner had put in the EFIS 5000. And also I have XM weather. I forgot to mention that in my systems as well. So in this case, there are Premier 1s out there. If they're equipped the way mine is, there is zero difference between the 1 and the 1A. And one of the things that's really a neat, in my opinion, a neat part about Premier airplanes totally, whether it's a Premier 1 or 1A, is the fact that the AVIONICS ProLine 21 is basically the same in every airplane. One of the things I saw in a lot of Citation jet CJs, older models, is that they tended to have a little bit different avionics package in them because you could mix and match some things. The Premier primarily it's only a ProLine 21 airplane at this point, and because of that, I can literally step into another one or a 1A and go fly it if I wanted to or needed to. And I wouldn't have any real learning curve of what I'd have to do because everything is basically the same.
Well, I'd love to ask you your experience with two things. One, the maintenance with Textron taking over the Hawker Beach brand. And then secondly, you also have a Premier Jet owners group that you're a part of. And I want to know how helpful that is in getting maintenance done and getting information disseminated about taking care of your airplane.
Sure. Well, Textron taking over the Premier line, and after it went through bankruptcy, and when was that, 2013 or something like that, has been a real benefit, I think, to Premier Jet owners in an overall way. If I had a criticism about it, is the fact that again, sometimes what you're paying for maintenance or you're paying for parts is subject to the eye of the beholder to some degree. But overall, I think if we didn't have Textron involved, it would be a real issue for the airplane. But having them there and their expertise, I think overall is a positive thing. You mentioned the Premier Jet Owners Association. That is something that was put together about a year and a half, 2 years ago, that I was asked to join. And I have joined and tried to be a participant in that. And it's a good thing because we try to share issues and problems that come up with the airplane. We share maintenance situations, opportunities. And something going on right now that's really a big deal in the last year is this ADS-B mandate, where the government has mandated that we have to modify our transponders in order for airplanes to see each other, basically, and to have a safer system for us all to be flying in. There are a couple of different ways to do that in the Premier, and so Rockwell Collins has a solution, Garmin has a solution, and but they are fairly expensive. And as most people that are owning airplanes are finding, this is not something we all were in love with, but it's something that we've had to do. But it is part of the avionics part of what's going on out here.
Wonderful. And you decided to do a little bit different system in yours than some people are taking, kind of a cheaper route. And you chose to do something that would be able to take you a little bit farther into the future as far as your avionics upgrades planning. Can you talk about that?
Sure. And I'm getting ready to do it. I haven't done it yet, actually. My ADS-B change is scheduled for December, the month of December. I tried to plan it when I was going to not have to use the airplane, and if I could combine it with a vacation opportunity that we have as a family that we're taking right after Thanksgiving. So the plane will go down for that opportunity before Thanksgiving, and hopefully should be ready by New Year's. That's the plan. But the one that I chose is called the modernization package. And what it does is it not only takes care of an ADS-B mandate, but it gives me a couple of different betterments, let's call it, that the airplane will have. One of them is something pretty unique to airplanes right now, and that is synthetic vision. And so the airplane will have that, although I don't fly in the mountainous areas where that would be really valuable to you. I think having it is something that for resale down the road will be a real buzz for somebody who might want to buy the airplane when I get, frankly, too old to fly this thing, I suppose. Also, the fact that this includes, we're putting WAAS GPSs in. And so I'll be able to do not only the standard WAAS approach that I can do now, but I'll be able to do what's called LPV approaches, which basically take a WAAS approach down to very similar altitudes that an ILS will give you. So basically, you're going to be able to come down when you're flying to a minimum in bad weather of approximately 200, 250 feet above the ground, which is pretty low. If you've ever been in some of our airplanes, when you fly these things and you're doing a full instrument approach and you pop out at 200 feet, I mean, now the ground's right there. And it's fabulous if you're a pilot, because it's what you want to see. You want to see that ground when you come to your missed approach point. And but it does, in my case, for example, in Lexington, in the airport that I currently fly out of, my minimum that I can actually land at is roughly about 750 feet. above the ground. This is going to give me almost 400 to 450 feet more of elevation coming down for me to be able to see the ground in bad weather, and that's a real benefit, I believe. The other unique thing about what I've had to do is my airplane happens to have dual FMS systems and dual GPS systems. The majority of Premier jets only had single FMS systems in them. And so in my case, because of that, it makes what I'm doing more complicated and unfortunately more costly, because you're having to pay for it twice for two different matching systems. But I have the ultimate backup that way. So if I lose system one, I've got system two. And that goes back to twin engine airplanes in the first place and twin jet airplanes, you know, how you feel about that. And in my opinion, when I'm willing to fly over the mountains and at night and over water and bad weather, I like backup. And so therefore there's a second system there for me at all times in order to help me.
Great safety features. Well, Lynn, I'm going to close with one more question about the airplane, and then I really want to dive into a little bit more of your history with flying. Tell me about the luggage compartment.
Sure. Well, that's Catherine's favorite part, is the luggage compartment. You know, we have outside luggage where it's behind the wing and underneath the left engine. You've got a very large compartment there that'll hold up to 400 pounds of luggage. And it is, I don't know the exact dimensions at this moment in time, but trust me, you know, you can put 4 sets of golf clubs in there, you can put 4 big bags in there, and you can carry all kinds of stuff. And it's a heated baggage compartment, by the way, which is very nice, because when you're flying 30 to 40,000 foot ranges most of the time, it's cold up there. So different things can get cold or frozen. So in this case, the airplane has a heated baggage compartment, keeps everything from doing that. Also, we have some extra baggage up in the nose. It's roughly about 125, 140 pounds up in the nose. Not a huge space up there, but you can put some bags up there that will help you. And then in the back of the airplane, where the potty seat is located, there is also some baggage space there that you can use, and there's two baggage hooks on each side where you can hang a suit or a coat or whatever you need back there. So that's another real benefit, I think, about this airplane, is the baggage is awesome.
It is. It's pretty generous for an airplane of this size, and I can witness that you have maxed out that 400-pound limit in the tail of your airplane.
Yeah, you know, I'll tell you what. When we put all the luggage out on the ground, when I'm just, you know, deciding how I'm going to load it, and I look at it and I go, I don't think there's any way we're going to get this in. And then amazingly, somehow I'm able to get it in there. And then when we land somewhere and we take it all out, I mean, we get a lot of eyes, people looking at us. Unbelievable. You're carrying a lot of stuff. So, you know, this airplane really gives you what some of the mid-sized jets can actually give you in terms of luggage. That is such a real step up from some of the smaller and older jets that came out years ago.
Well, Lynn, thank you so much for all of this insight on the Premier One. We really appreciate you taking the time to be here today.